Let's have a look at the ionic basis of the action potential. It's important because a lot of pharmacology, especially drugs acting on the nervous system, operate by working on the action potential. So let's imagine that we've got an axon like this. Here's the outside and here's the inside. And what have we got in the axon? Well, first of all, remember we've got low sodium on the inside and high potassium, and on the outside we've got high sodium and low potassium. And the reason for that is we have this sodium-potassium pump constantly pumping out sodium and pumping potassium in. This sodium-potassium pump doesn't play any role in the shape of the action potential other than creating these gradients that we've got here. So this is just running in the background and we can totally forget it from now on. What we do have, and we need this to create the actual resting potential, are leak potassium channels, and they're constantly open all the time, and that's what causes the resting membrane potential. We're going to record down here. We've got a little volt meter measuring the voltage of the membrane, and before anything exciting happens, this is going to be at around, let's say minus 70 millivolts. So if we get a little depolarization that's below the threshold of the sodium channels, we're not going to see very much. So let's put those sodium channels in here. So this one's closed. Should be a voltage gated sodium channel, and we've also got voltage gated K channels, and they're both closed at the moment. A little depolarization isn't going to open, but if the depolarization is big enough, what's going to happen is these voltage gated sodium channels are going to open. So because they open, now sodium starts to enter the cell because it's going down its concentration gradient and its electrical gradient. So remember, the inside is negative. So the result of that is we get even more depolarization and that means more sodium channels open, so more sodium enters, and so we get this positive feedback cycle which carries on until we reach the equilibrium potential for sodium, which we call ENA. Now a couple of things start to happen. So what's happened is normally the sodium channels are in equilibrium between being opened, closed and inactivated. Constantly in this equilibrium, and up to now they've been closed. When these channels have been depolarized, what happens is they move into the open state. So you start to see open channels. But then, from the open state, they can now move into this other state, which is the inactivated state, which is a closed state as well. It doesn't conduct ions. So basically, another gate closes on the inside here, and that stops the influx of sodium. Now that alone will mean that now we're just going back to where we were before, so we start to repolarize the membrane. At the same time, the depolarization has caused potassium channels to open, and this time, because potassium is high on the inside, this potassium leaves the cell, and that speeds up the rate of repolarization even faster. And because now we've not only got these leak currents, but we also got voltage gated potassium currents open, we now get even more negative. And the next thing that happens, while this is happening, because we're moving into the hyperpolarized state again, these channels move invisibly from inactivated again to closed. I say invisibly because we can't see the fact that another gate has closed, but this one here has reopened. And so the sodium channel is now ready to reopen if it needs to. Let me just tidy this up a bit for you. So meantime, because we've got down to here, we're now able, the voltage gated sodium channels have moved into the closed position and can be opened again. But also the voltage gated potassium channels close. So we're not now getting this efflux of potassium. And that means we're just left with the leak currents, and so our membrane potential goes back to where we were before. So just to recap, what's happening is that here we've got voltage gated sodium channels opening, they inactivate here, potassium channels open to speed the repolarization, and for a while these slow voltage gated potassium channels still remain open, take some time to close. As they do so, we return to our membrane potential. In the meantime, the current passes down the neuron caused by the influx of sodium earlier, and that then starts to open sodium channels further down the membrane. And so the story goes on and on and on, and that's how we get conduction. So there are several pharmacological targets here. For one thing, we got this, we could just simply try to stop sodium channels opening, and that would slow the conduction of action potentials. Another trick is to specifically bind to the inactivated state, and that's what drugs like flecainide do. The result of that is that you actually only get block when you get high rates of firing. So you're specifically blocking high rates of firing because you only see this inactivated state when you're at the top of the action potential. The other thing you can do is to target voltage gated potassium channels. If you make them open for longer, then this tail is going to get longer, and that's going to slow down the action potential because here you've got a refractory period and it's harder to activate the cells. So there's quite a few ways in which